Hi there, this is MJ from Mirrored Wellness, the podcast about mirroring others' skillful habits so we can become our best empowered self. We'll talk about tips, tricks, and share some personal journeys along the way. So join me for today's topic. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, my name is MJ, and this is Mirrored Wellness, a podcast about the self-mastery pursuit, where we talk about mirroring other people's skillful habits. There's been a lot of people out there, entrepreneurs, business owners, and many, many other people out there that have paved the way for us to be the best of ourselves. Today we're going to talk about procrastination. There's a quote by Pablo Picasso. It states, "Only put off until tomorrow what we are willing to die having left undone," which is quite a profound statement. Basically, what Pablo is talking about is, hey, you never know when you're going to die. You don't know when your end comes. So we really want to be or have a sense of urgency. Now, I am not a master non-procrastinator. I have done my share of procrastinating throughout the years, and I know tons of people who are also in the same boat as me. Of course, I do know people who are not so much procrastinators, but there are 3 tips that I have for tackling the procrastination. There is a TED Talk by Tim Urban in 2016 where he talks about procrastination. In the TED Talk, Tim talks about having 2 kinds of procrastination and what I would call 3 procrastination characters. The 2 kinds of procrastination are ones with deadlines and ones without. The more dangerous procrastination moments are the non-dated, non-due date kinds of procrastination, where there's no deadline to have basically an anxiety attack about, if we're being honest. So, to go back, the 3 characters in which I am referring to is your rational mind, which is the one he says, okay, so for an example, he had a paper to write, and for his senior thesis, he mapped it all out. He had a whole year to do it, and then he wrote it in 2 days. So his logical mind was the one who used the time frame, or didn't use, but put together the, plan to tackle the 90-page thesis that he had to do. But he calls this his procrastination monster, or the procrastination monkey, I believe that's what he calls it, where instant gratification monkey, that's what it was called. So on this instant gratification monkey is the one that you start your paper and all of a sudden then you're looking things up on Wikipedia or scrolling through, in my case, scrolling through social media trying to find inspirational quotes. And then before you know it, your due date is arrived and you're panicking, which is the 3rd character, which is basically panic. Panic is logic character's favorite because that is where you get your work done. But unfortunately, a lot of us have the instant gratification monkey. Now, when there is no deadline, that panic doesn't really show up because you don't really have a deadline for the panic. It can sometimes show up in stuff that doesn't have deadlines, like when we realize that maybe we need to do something, this is right in front of our face, but it still doesn't have a deadline, so we can still put it aside, per se. So I have a few tips. These tips, there are 3 tips here and we'll see what your thoughts are. If you want to leave comments on my social media, or if you have questions, please feel free to do that. I'm going to try to put in the notes a link to the TED Talk from 2015 or 16. I highly recommend you listen to it. He is rather funny and makes light of a lot of the procrastination, which is good because it is, I find it to be a slightly heavy subject, surrounding a lot of guilt and stuff like that. So here are the 3 tips. My tip number 1. So my tip number 1 is to identify the feeling. So when you go to do something and then you try to distract yourself from doing that, what is the feeling you get? Is it fear of something? Sometimes it's good to recognize that you are in the beginning stages of trying to procrastinate something and sit down and say, okay, well, why am I procrastinating? There's also a really good activity that Tim Ferriss has. I'll see if I can put the link to this as well. It's called fear setting. So if you are struggling, like I do a lot, with fear surrounding, activities that need to be taken care of, namely monetary stuff tends to give me hives. Personal monetary, that is. That's pretty much, if it's business, I'm fine. But personal makes me a little bit itchy. So there's a lot of fear of judgment, fear of failure that surrounds a lot of stuff that I procrastinate around, and also a fear of success. This activity is basically 7 questions. It's long form questions that goes through, worst case scenario, what's the probability of that scenario, what are you giving up by not doing this thing. I found it to be a very, very helpful tool to move past some fears that I have surrounding things that I procrastinate over, because we do have a lot of guilt that surrounds us with this procrastination, right? So my first tip is to identify the fear or identify the reason why you might be procrastinating. If it's something really light, like I'm procrastinating because I don't feel like I have what I need, sometimes there's more to that than just procrastinating because you feel like maybe you don't have enough money to do this or whatever. But sometimes it's just an excuse. And the terrible thing about excuses are that they are valid most of the time. But that's a whole nother podcast. So we'll go into that another day. So tip number 2, rules. One way that I've learned how to tackle some of the smaller things that I end up procrastinating is one rule that I started a while ago, and I learned this from somebody. It might have been an old customer of mine, or somewhere I heard this, where this person says, if it's less than 5 minutes, if I know it's going to take me less than 5 minutes, I just make a rule to do it. Instead of putting it on a calendar to do later, which I highly suggest you do, calendar it out, or a to-do list, a running to-do list, which I also have that as well, which isn't as good as the calendar. Or you can have both. But I digress. So, rules. So if, say, you have to write out a check for somebody and you've been procrastinating writing that check out, it will literally take you less than 5 minutes to write that check out and pop it in the mail if that's something that you need to do. I know I'm dating myself, I'm sorry. 5 minutes. And the way I've gotten myself to do that is, I love checklists. And this might sound really ridiculous, and I know some of you are do the same thing. I put it on my to-do list, do it, and check it off. It is one of the most satisfying things, and I'm not entirely sure how okay that is with a lot of people, but it makes me feel like I've accomplished something. It's a really good way to get a win for the day. So establish some ground rules as far as, maybe 5 minutes is a little too long for you. Maybe you say, hey, if it's going to take me less than 3 minutes or 2 minutes, or maybe 5 minutes is too short. Maybe it's 10 minutes. But you got to find what works out for you. And the third tip is find somebody to help you stay accountable. So say you have a to-do list, right? You're going to want to find somebody that has you, that wants to see you succeed. Like truly wants to see you succeed. Give that person, the moment you put it out there to a person who really wants to see you succeed, they will ask you about it. They should. A good accountability buddy, which is I call accountability buddy, a good accountability buddy will say, hey, just checking in. Didn't hear from you yesterday or the day before, and I know you said you wanted to do this thing. Pick somebody that you care about, that you care that they care for you, if that makes sense. Somebody that you won't just brush off their judgment, per se. And those are my 3 tips. Those are my 3 tips. The third one is by far one of the most helpful things in the past year or so that I've had. Had a group, accountability group that I've been a part of, and it has been a really great thing. So again, I will put, hopefully in the show notes for you, I will put the link to that TED Talk as well as the link to the fair sitting activity from Tim Ferriss. So I wish you adieu, and I will talk to you next time. Enjoy and be well.